Hey everybody, Phil here. I recently made a video, top 5 low stakes poker hacks. In most of my top 5s, my producer Thomas asks me a question that I have not prepared for, and I rattle off what I can off the top of my head. Because you guys like that so much, I wanted to make another video along the same lines. So this is gonna be the next 5 low stakes poker hacks. This time I've prepared my answers, so it'll probably be better. If you watched the last video, you could probably click on somewhere. I was resistant to the term hacks. I said, you know what, I'm gonna call these tips. Because low stakes games can be so exploitable, can include such weak players, I actually think that hacks is appropriate because you make one adjustment and it actually does improve your win rate significantly if you execute it. So without further ado, number 1, be nitty against 3-bets. This is not gonna make you money, it's gonna save you money. A lot of players in low stakes games miss so many of the 3-bets that they're supposed to make, whether it be bluffs or thinner value hands, or even value hands that are not that thin, but they're just uncomfortable raising them. And so, you know, if you look up defending a hand like King Queen offsuit or King 9 suited in a solver against certain actions, it's gonna tell you to defend. But if your opponent's range is actually Ace King and Queen Queen plus, 90% of the time, you can't call those hands. You're just getting crushed. Find the discipline to make folds that are not even solver approved. They're not even optimal folds, because they are optimal folds against the opponent you're playing. Obviously, pay attention to your opponents, and if you have one who's 3-betting a massively wide range, then by all means, attack it. But until your opponents prove otherwise, err on the side of folding, because their range is almost certainly too tight on average. Number 2, play aggressive. Lee? Yeah. Number 2, play aggressively. In theory, there are a lot of hand categories that don't bet and want to control the size of the pot, either because they can't get enough value across multiple streets, they don't want to be raised, whether in position or out of position, because they're hands that do pretty poorly against raises. And the third reason is often that they want to check down to then induce bluffs from your opponents. Now, a lot of weaker opponents are not raising nearly enough, both for value and as bluffs. So you don't get put in those spots. The less your opponents are raising, the more value bets have. As I mentioned in the last video, you know, when 5 people see the flop, you have to be very, very selective regarding the hands you want to put money into the pot. If 5 people see the flop, don't start betting these thin hands. But in short-handed pots, you can do a lot more betting for value and protection and as a semi-bluff than you could in theory. In addition to not raising enough, they also don't bluff enough when you check back. So when you do check back, you're not facing those river bluffs. You're not generating that extra value. Number 3, make conversation. This is obviously only applicable to live poker, but there are a couple of reasons why making conversation is great. You'll make the game more friendly and more enjoyable. There's no real downside to making the conversation. Actually, it can keep you more welcome in the game, depending on what kind of game it is. Maybe it's a home game, and it can keep people coming back because they're having a better time. You want your opponents to have a good time playing poker. And also you just want to be a kind human. But, and here's the greedy part, you also get a lot of information. The variety of players that show up in low stakes games, the difference between the way that they play is vast. And so when you're playing against them readless, you're going to make a lot of mistakes compared to if you have been able to kind of profile them and gotten an understanding of how much poker they've played. So in these conversations with people, you get to learn how much poker they play. You get to learn what their career is. You get to learn where they're from, how often they get to the casino. And it's going to allow you to understand what you're up against more often, more readily. You can actually get a lot of information in tournaments. Tournaments attract all kinds of players. An anecdote that illustrates this, a close friend of mine was deep in the main event. He's really nice and friendly and talkative, so he is striking up conversations with lots of people. The main event's a great place to have a lot of conversations, not just strategically, but it's a really fun environment. Everybody's really excited to be there. You get people from all walks of life. But anyways, the guy sitting next to him was a non-pro and knew that he was a pro. And as they started to approach the bubble, they weren't quite that close, but it was the day that the bubble was going to burst. He started asking my friend, if I fold every hand now, will I make the money? And first my friend's like, no. I mean, my friend was honest. He was like, no, we're too far away. You're going to blind off your whole stack. And then every 15 minutes, he would ask again. And my friend would just tell him, no, not yet. 15 minutes passes. Can I fold to the money yet? No, not yet. And then eventually, can I fold to the money yet? Yeah, you can. I mean, he was honest with him the whole time. He gave him the right advice. But it's throughout this process, he knows, first of all, that this player is very excited about making the money and very nervous about not making the money. So he's going to play really cautiously. And then further than that, he actually knows whether or not he's playing any hands because he's following my friend's advice. By the time it got to, yes, you can fold every hand to the money, he knows this player is not going to play any hands. But yeah, if my friend wasn't so outgoing and talkative, that info doesn't ever come to him, and he doesn't have that story to tell. So number 4 and 5 are actually both about 3-betting, but different areas of it. Before I get into those, if you're enjoying this content, I'd really appreciate if you would let me know if you would like this video and if you'd subscribe if you'd like to see more of it. But without further ado, hack number 4, which is 3-bet vastly different ranges against early position and late position opens. And I guess secondarily, if you start to get to know your opponents, some weaker players open the same range from everywhere. And in that case, you don't need to do this. Others are too tight for every position, and then you still don't really want to attack their late position opens. Some people are too loose from every position, and you kind of want to attack all of their opens, even if they're early position. But the reason this works is because most players who are not super experienced don't adjust enough to the situation. So, when they open under the gun, they have a relatively tight range. If you make a big 3-bet out of the big blind, let's say, they're supposed to fold some pretty good hands, but people tend to not do that. But similarly, if they open on the button, some people open 90% of hands on the button, whereas others, are opening 50% or somewhere in between. When you 3-bet them, they kind of have this idea in their head of what's good enough to call a 3-bet with. When they open under the gun, maybe 80% of the range is good enough to call a 3-bet with. But when they open on the button, to them, it might be more like 30%. So, if you're 3-betting against somebody who's folding 70% of the time, you're going to make a lot of money pre-flop. And then you also get to see a flop most of the time that they do call, and you realize some equity there. So really attack those late position opens against these players who aren't adjusting enough. What's supposed to happen in theory is they open 50% on the button, you 3-bet, they have to defend some kind of weak hands, because otherwise what you're supposed to do is 3-bet a bunch of weak hands. And if you're doing that, then they get to defend weak hands, et cetera, et cetera. But because a lot of these players aren't adjusting, you can just kind of go crazy and attack. And I also want to point out that you don't just attack with bluffs. People who are overfolding, it helps to just 3-bet, King 10 suited when you otherwise weren't going to. That works well as a 3-bet against button opens, whether they're loose or tight. But I just want to illustrate that. Don't 3-bet a super polarized range against them, like Queens plus and 7-6 suited and 9-3 suited or something like that. Just 3-bet a lot of everything. Even the hands that are pretty good are going to overperform when they're folding so much. Number 5, which is also about 3-betting, is essentially isolate weaker players. Isolate refers to either somebody's limped and you raise to force other people out of the pot so you can play with them, or somebody's raised and you 3-bet to force other people out of the pot and play the pot with them. People tend to not play well when they're not the aggressor. And if you're at a table with, half the table's weak, half the table's strong, you want to be playing heads-up pots against weaker players. So isolating them serves the purpose of isolating them and playing the pot with them more often. You should especially do this in position because everybody tends to play more poorly out of position, tends to be more uncomfortable out of position. And when you are in position, you should especially do this with deeper stacks. So when you're in position with deeper stacks, I would take this concept pretty far. And once again, don't just 3-bet a polarized range of really strong hands and bluffs. If somebody is weak enough and stacks are deep enough and you're in position, I would just not call any hands if they've opened and nobody else has called. Or even if they've opened and somebody's called who you think is pretty likely to fold to the 3-bet, just every hand you want to play a 3-bet. Yes, your variance is going to go up a little bit. You need to be playing properly bankrolled for the stakes that you're playing because you're going to be playing bigger pots more often, but your edge is going to go up a lot with it. And when your edge goes up with your variance, it actually doesn't increase your odds of having a downswing. It actually can often reduce them. All right, that's it. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you can apply some of these to your games if you're playing in low stakes games and or playing against weaker players. And especially if you've made some of these adjustments and have had good results, let me know because I'd love to hear about it. Until next time, take care and good luck.